Welcome back. Here we are to continue making our React Weather API application. And we're on to video 3 right here. In the last video, we worked on our CSS styles. In this video, let's get started working with the weather data from the OpenWeatherMap service. So I'll open up my code here, and I'll get my app back. So here's my app here. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the weather.js file. So this is our component that is going to do the work of, loading the weather data, okay? So there's a couple things that need to happen here, okay? So first of all, when you click the button right here, we need to know. And when you click the button, we need to grab the zip code data and then send that to the OpenWeatherMap service, okay? And at that stage, we have to wait, and when the data comes back, it'll take a little bit of time. When the data loads, we're going to have to set that data on another state variable. And that variable, when we update it with a new value, it'll cause our component to render, and we can draw the temperature and the other weather data into the component, okay? So let's do those in steps, right? So first of all, let's handle the submission from the form, okay? So I'm going to go up to the form element here and add an onSubmit. Okay, so an onSubmit is a handler that, or an event that occurs with our component when you click, well, either when you hit enter in an input field or click the submit button. So that's a button that has type submit on it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to handle this the same way that we handled the onChange down here with a function. So I'll type in my function here. And again, I typed the whole function there, right? So I got the whole thing, parentheses, arrow, curly brackets, right? I have a font, so actually this arrow is an equal and the arrow, right? So my font just kind of, when the two characters are side by side, they look like an arrow, but it's really just the equals and the greater than symbol, right? Okay. So this event also gets an event object, right? And like we said earlier, you don't have to have the parentheses if you have a single parameter, so I'll get rid of that. And we're going to use 2 lines of code here. So I'm going to leave the curly brackets there, and I'll hit return and put my lines of code each on that separate line, right? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to prevent the default behavior, okay? If we don't do this, our submitting the form is going to refresh the page, right? And that's going to refresh our JavaScript and cause everything to start over again, right? And we don't want that. So we want the page to stay here. And you can see, like, if I comment this out and then I run the page, when I click the submit button, if you look, you'll see that little blue line run across the top up here, right, in the bar up there. And what's happening is the page is reloading. And you can see that here, like if I type in a bunch of numbers into the field here, when I hit submit, you can see they get cleared because the whole page is refreshing, right? So I want to prevent that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in e.preventDefault. So I'm going to use the event object here and call its preventDefault method. And so that's going to prevent the default behavior of the browser to reload the page when you submit a form. So now you can see if I type something into the field here and hit submit, I don't see the line go across there to show me the page is loading, and then the number in here doesn't go away, okay? So we've got that taken care of, right? So now what we want to do is we want to set some weather data here. Let's set up a variable to hold our weather data. So I'm going to say const, use the square brackets. Let's just call this data, right? I don't want to confuse. We could call it weather data, but we'll just call it data, right? And I don't want to call it weather because it'll be spelled the same as this one, right? So let's do set data, okay? And again, we're going to use state here, and the default value for our data is going to be null, okay? Okay, great. So let's mock up what the weather data might say, right? So we might have, let's do this. Let's say you submit the form, and what we're going to do is we're going to say set data, right? This variable right here, equal to an object, and we'll give it 2 properties. We'll say temp is 70 degrees and description is partly cloudy. That sounds like a classic weather description, right? So we'll say partly cloudy there, okay? And so now when you submit the form, it's going to set this variable to this object with the two properties. And what I'd like to do now is display these two properties above my component, right? So I want to have it say 70 degrees and then say partly cloudy underneath it. So up here above the form, I'll make a new div. And inside this div, what I want to do is display the data right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the curly brackets and I'm going to say data question mark, you know, equals, and then I'm going to put in, let's make this an H1, and this will be the temperature data, right? So if data is not null or not a falsy value, like this question mark is kind of like an if statement, right? They call it a ternary operator, right? So what I want to do is I want to use this to determine if this is null, in which case we're not going to do this thing, right? And if it is null, or if it isn't null, then we want to use the data on it, and I want to grab this temperature variable, right? So we'll say data dot temp, right? And then over here, I got an error because I got to include another thing here. So I'm going to have some alternative stuff. So if I wanted to show something like an alternative piece of information or some alternative component, I could put it after the colon. But what I think I'll do here is I'll just say null right there, okay? So if we render null, React renders nothing. If we have data loaded, then it shows us the value, right? Let me refresh my page. So it shows us nothing here, and when I click submit, it says 70 degrees. So my challenge to you is, can you display something else in here, or can you style this, right? Give that a try. Okay, cool. Now let's go on, right? So now that we've got this working, how do we actually get the real data from the weather service, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to write another function inside the weather function here, okay? So I'm going to just put this here. I'm going to say function, how about get weather, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to say, in front of function here, we're going to say async, okay? So an async function is used to get data asynchronously. And this is what we need to do, because when we make a request to the internet doesn't return the data immediately. Sometimes it takes time. So, so what we need to do is we need to wait, and our asynchronous function will wait while it processes stuff, okay? You know, effectively, right? So here we've got the async function, and what we want to do first is we want to say try and catch, okay? And the idea is if we try something and it fails, instead of crashing our program, it'll run to the catch block here, okay? And then we can handle the error in some way. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const response equals await fetch, and then we're going to fetch some data here, and then we're going to say const JSON equals await response.json, okay? And then the last step is when we load the JSON data here, we want to set the JSON data we loaded on the data variable that we've created. So I'm going to say set data, there we go, equal to JSON, right? And why don't we actually log that too? So let's do console.log the JSON data. We're going to use this in a moment. So we're set up pretty good now. So we got this, and if we get an error here, we're going to catch the error in a variable here, and then below that, you know, maybe we'll just console log the error message. So I'll put console log error message, right? Okay, so that's looking pretty good. We still need to figure out what the URL is that we're going to use with fetch. Okay, so we need to look that up. So we'll do that in a moment. Right now I just left it as the empty string. Okay, so we're going to work on that in a moment. But what we'd like to do is down here, when we, instead of doing set data here, you can see like I'm setting the data and then I've got my data here. But what I'd like to do is, instead of setting the data there, I'm going to do the set data inside this get weather function, right? And set it to the data that we loaded from our API, right? So I'm going to get rid of this line here and replace it with get weather. Okay, so we'll just call the get weather function from our form when you submit. Okay, you type in your zip code, 91223 or whatever it is, 92133, whatever your zip code is, and then you submit, and it's going to call the get weather function, and then it's going to, go out to the URL, get a response, stream the response as JSON, log it to the console, set it here on your data variable, and then we'll display the data down here when the data updates. Okay, great. So we're all set up. So now we just need to figure out what this URL is. So I'm going to go to the web here, and I'm going to go to openweathermap.org, right? And what you want to do is go here and sign up. So there'll be an option here to sign up. I'm already signed in, right? So you're going to want to sign in there. And what you're going to do is once you've signed in, go to the option here, sign in, go to My API Keys. And you'll need to get an API key. So grab the API key here, copy it. And what you're going to do is you're going to paste it in here. I'm going to put it in my code here. Let's do const API key equals, and put it inside the quotation marks. So I've got my API key here, and now we just need our URL, okay? So go back to the website and go to the API section, okay? And in the API section, you'll see the current weather data here, and we're going to use this API. They have a couple APIs here. They've got 1 hour call, hourly forecast 4 days, 16-day forecast, 30-day forecast, and some other ones, right? We're going to use the current weather data. So it just gives you the data at a location right now. So click on the API doc right here, and this will tell you how the API works. And we're going to use, this is, get the data by city name, but what we're going to use is the zip code. So here's one getting it by city ID. I guess every city has an ID name. Here's one getting geographic coordinates. Maybe we'll use this one later. And here's the zip code, right? So what we want to do is we want this stuff right here. So I'm going to copy this whole thing, right? And they leave a little bit out here, so let's go through it, right? So I'm going to take this and let's do const, and maybe I'll make the window a little bit wider so I can type this in here, right? So let's do path equals, and I'm going to use the back quote. This is the character, it's up to the left of the number 1. And I'll paste my API in here. And at the beginning, I'm going to add https://. So they leave that out, so we need to have that. And then over here where it says zip code, what I want to do is I want to grab our zip variable and put it in here inside these curly braces. But what we need to do is put a $sign in front of here. So you can see that changes color to show me that I'm going to include a variable inside this string. And then I'm going to get rid of the country code right there. So I'll remove that. Don't lose, you get rid of the comma, but don't lose the ampersand or the equal sign on this side, right? And then last, we need to include the API ID. So let's grab our API key here, and I'll put it inside the curly braces, and then on this side of the curly brace, I'm going to add the $sign, okay? And what we'll do is we'll take our path, and we're going to use it here inside fetch. So I'll just paste it there, get rid of those quotation marks, and let's test our app out right now. So right now it's not going to display anything, but it will print the weather data to the console, and we need to look at that to see what kind of data they're giving us and what form it's in, right? So let's go back to our browser and refresh, and then I'm going to type in a zip code. Let's do 94010, and then I'll hit submit, and it did something, right? And let's go to the console now. So I'm going to inspect my page, go to the console here, and you can see I've got an object here, and when I click on it and open it up, this is the weather data that they sent me. So it's an object and it has all of these properties. So I could say, you know, in my case, I could say json.base and it would say stations. I could say json.clouds and then it would give me all 75 as an object because I see the curly braces, right? If I do COD, it would say 200. So what I want is I want the temperature. So if I look at the temperature, it's under main. So it says main.temp. So let's go get that, right? So if I want to display that, I can't just say data.temp. I got to say main.temp, right? Which is a little ugly, but you know, it's not too bad, right? Oh, look, and there it is. 283, right? Okay, so quick note here, right? The default weather is sent to us in Kelvin, right? So what we need to do is we need to either convert that into Celsius or Fahrenheit, or we have to ask the API to send it to us in another unit. Okay, so let's save that and change it here. If you look at the API here, they'll give you a section on units. I'm going to do find units. Yeah, so it says units of measure. So I'll click on this link, and it says units of measure are standard, metric, and imperial. And it actually doesn't show us an example of how to use this, but the idea is you have to put it at the end of the URL. So I'll show you, right? So we're going to go here to the end of the URL, and you know, everything after the question mark is called the query string. And what you do with the query string is you include variable and value pairs. So I'm going to put zip equals value of our zip variable. And then you use an ampersand to add another variable value pair. So here would be variable is API ID, and value is this value in the API key. So to add another variable, I'm going to put the ampersand and put units equals, and then we can put whatever unit name we want. I'm going to put imperial, and that should be Fahrenheit. Okay? So let's refresh our page and get the new weather data. Let's do 94110 submit. Oh, 51.7 degrees. So that sounds like Fahrenheit, right? Okay, so great. So everything's working. So that got us started pretty far. Let's stop here, and then I'll continue in the next video.